Everyone, I'm Marit with as the executive director with IAT. Steve, thanks for being with us again this afternoon.
You bet.
You've pulled an all-dayer, is what I would
So
call it
far.
at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us again for InsureCon. We hope you've enjoyed the sessions and found them helpful and useful to you. We'll continue to build programming throughout the summer and obviously throughout the year. But before we get started, I do have a couple of announcements. First, I do want to extend my thanks to IAT's lead underwriters for making the virtual InsureCon possible. It's because of your generosity that this program is available for our members. So I really want to take a moment to thank our strategic partner, Texas Mutual Insurance Company, Union Standard Insurance Group, UFG, Allied Trust, Central Insurance Companies, Service Lloyds, Liberty Mutual, Safeco Insurance, Imperial PFS, Travelers, State Auto Insurance Companies, Nationwide, Swiss Re and IIT Advantage E&O markets. It's so great to have such a nice wide variety of carriers and companies that really support us and our agents, and try to continue to make sure that we have the best resources available. So thank you to all of you again. It's been fun to have InsureCon throughout a whole month and have a series. We're obviously wrapping it up today. But next week, we will also have another program with Ray Perryman. So I want to remind you about an exclusive webinar that we're hosting on June 30th with the economist, Dr. Ray Perryman, titled Outlook for Recovery, the Texas Economy with Oil and Gas Industry as well. And during this webinar, Dr. Perryman will discuss the downturn in the economy due to the hit in the oil and gas industry, which of course has been extensive, and provide his expertise and his thoughts on how the economy will rebound. So I hope you will join us. Now, of all things, we are having technology issues during the middle of registrations. So please go to our website and get our phone number and just call in and we'll get you registered. Our phone number is 1-800-880-7428. So once again, that's 800-880-7428. So please call in and register by phone. And we apologize. We had a server get hit and a bit of a glitch this week, so we're trying to recover with some of the weather and so forth. Another thing I want to visit with you about is that we are launching our compensation survey again. I know we tried a year ago or so. We just didn't have enough respondents to make sure that it was statistically valid. But we have continued to invest and partner with Intel agents. And they're a new analytics-driven organization that's helping us specialize in providing actionable insights for our independent agents. And by partnering with IIT and other state-based associations, Intel Agents is gathering data from member agencies and other sources, which then they can process and offer back to agents that will give you actual local and relevant insights to inform your strategic business decisions. They're working with almost 30 states now, so the quantity of data that we're getting is going to be extensive, but it's only as good as the data we get in, and we need it from you. So the first step is in the process is to relaunch the compensation survey. It's specific to the roles in the independent agencies and to Texas itself. So you can actually come back and get data about what it looks like in your region, your size agency, and so forth. But we need to have you participate and provide it. In order to get this data, if you are an agency principal, you'll get an email today from this session. After this session, it will contain information on how to get started on the survey. We encourage you to participate. There's instructions too if you'd rather have someone else do it instead of you as well. We will bring that along with the RISE report, which actually the association board is investing in paying for the first 250 reports. So if you get in there and get going, it's worth about a $500 report at the end of the day. So I hope you'll participate, and we're hoping to bring you programming in November with those results. I'm sure we'll be doing some series this fall virtually and hopefully in person in San Marcos on November 8th and 9th. All right, I know I'm giving you a whole bunch of information and taking away from your time, Steve, but we do want to connect here with our members. And of course, the last thing I want to comment about is, IIT's government affairs has been in close contact with our state legislators and the Big I to advocate for independent agents, especially with the issues that are arising from COVID-19. Policymakers and legislators continually consider changing how our industry is regulated, and IIT's respected and streamlined lobby efforts help prevent harmful bills from becoming law and promote policies that will help our industry thrive. As you all know, we've got an impact board. We've got the Political Action Committee Impact, which is the conduit for raising funds that help us participate with our legislators and make sure that we get strong business focused legislators and regulators in place to support us. So I want to thank Lee and Jill for all their work that they do as well. So with that being said, I hope you will go ahead and contribute to Impact and go to our website for that. We're always looking to make sure that we've got the right resources to support you and make sure that your businesses are safe and protected in any kind of regulatory environment. So with that, we've been lucky to have you, Steve, all day long. And if you haven't heard Steve speak yet, which I think most of you on the call have at least seen at least one of his sessions today, he's the co-founder of McKee Wallwork and Company, and a nationally recognized marketing advisory firm that specializes in generating new momentum for stalled, stuck, and stale organizations. I'm actually excited to be working with Steve on a couple other projects with other state associations. So thank you, Steve, for being willing to do that with us. And you'll also be back with us at Joe Vincent. And I think we're talking about doing sort of a pre-Joe Vincent survey to see what's happened with the industry during the course of that time. So, I actually like the fact that we did the study right pre-COVID because it baselines before the chaos, and then we'll actually have enough time after that to see where it sort of runs itself out. So, Steve is also the author of When Growth Stalls, How It Happens, Why You're Stuck and What to Do About It, and Power Branding, Leveraging the Success of the World's Best Brands, which is called the definitive book on modern branding. So if you'll join me in welcoming Steve this one last time, this session during June, I appreciate you being here, Steve, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Mart. Yeah, the only thing more difficult than doing 4 sessions in a row is listening to me for 4 sessions in a row. So for any of you that are doing that, my apologies. And I certainly hope that I will see you at Joe Vincent. We've got to get through this thing and get things back to normal. So we want to talk about commoditization right now. We'd rather talk about it than live it, that's for sure. And as has been the case with each of these 4 phases, the reason we're doing this is because businesses, like people, are material things and they decay over time. And so if we want to keep them alive, we got to keep them in shape. In order to keep them in shape, we have to understand the things that make for healthy companies. We need to have that coherent viewpoint about the forces at work, both for good and for ill, in our businesses. So if you look at the disruption of innovation, distribution of innovation life cycle from innovators to laggards, and you overlay it with corporate phases of growth and industry phases of growth, you get what we call the disruption cycle. And we've had a fun day so far looking through the various phases down here now on the last phase of commoditization. So as Marat mentioned, we took the survey in February before all this stuff hit, like right before it hit. I think March 11th was sort of D-Day, I think is what history's recording for COVID. So we were in and out of the field just before that. Great response from a lot of you, which gave us a lot of terrific data that we're using to share the lessons with today. Each of you who took the survey got your report, should have gotten your report. If you didn't get your report, let us know. And if you haven't taken the survey and would like to, we can make arrangements for that. We've got a lot of chock full of good information in there as it relates to your organization compared to the overall IIAT cohort. Speaking of which, this is how the organization broke down in terms of the phase distribution. This commoditization phase is the smallest group, which is a good thing because it's not a pleasant place to be. But it's an area where everybody in the entire cycle is headed, if you don't interrupt it. There's nothing that says your destiny is commoditization unless you ignore it. Then your destiny will be commoditization. But a lot of great companies have found a way to continue turning through the cycle without getting into this phase. If you're there, we want to talk about what to do when you're there and how to get out of it. So today's this hour's phase breakdown is on commoditization. Well, why are we here? How on earth did we get here, and how the heck do we get out of the commoditization phase? That's what we want to talk about today. this is a moment. The kind of the running story I've been telling is the 4 phases are like 4 kids. You love each one of them for different reasons. And the sort of age-old answer to which child do you love the most is the one that needs me the most. So I don't know that I can say I love commoditization the most, but I do feel a great deal of empathy and sympathy and compassion for companies that are in commoditization mode, because look at this, it's just not a happy time. We just feel like things are going to come to an end. And commoditization actually has the highest number of strongest agreed to statements in the entire survey. And if you just scan your eye down the kind of things on this list, from margins being tighter and price pressure being on, to the company feeling lost and trying to survive, and employees not being in sync with leadership, and we're not aligned on strategy, and we're not willing to take risks, and we don't embrace change. It's a sad time, but there's even more. Work is harming my personal relationships. Can't stop thinking about it when I go home. You know, I'm not sure what we stand for. It's a sad moment. The last statement there, we need a new business model. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And we need to help get you there. So that's what we want to look at. We actually have 7 points that we're going to go through, obviously pretty quickly. None of these 1-hour webinars are able to go into great depth, but they're meant to give you perspective on where you are in the cycle, and hopefully give you something to think about and work on, something to chew on as we go forward. So the first piece of advice when you're in commoditization is to just be honest about it. It could be one reason why it was only 18% of the cohort, is because companies weren't really facing up to it. Although when you look at all the corresponding data, it's kind of hard to avoid it. You know, in commoditization mode, you tend to feel things like, I'm not sure what we stand for. We're trying to be all things to all people. I mean, just look at the stark difference here between this phase and the other 3. Where revenue is more important than profit right now. We're just trying to keep the lights on, kind of a thing. That's you can make some really bad decisions doing this. Speed is more important than quality. We got to get stuff out the door. We don't invest enough in things like research and development. We don't invest enough in training. Workarounds are the only way to get things done around here, because maybe we're holding stuff together with staples and baling wire. We're just trying to survive. It gets kind of sad. Our company is lost. This is a feeling that you get. It's a very difficult time. And when you're in management, it's even more difficult, because as employees leave, as they feel like there are better opportunities elsewhere, you're the last one there. And as I've mentioned before, I have experienced this. We came very close to bankruptcy 18 years ago as a company, which is what started us on this journey. I know what it feels like to have employee after employee come into your office and close the door and say, can we talk? It's not fun. So with respect to honestly confronting where you are, if you look at the things that are highlighted in white there, if that's you, that's you. And denying it won't do you any good. Covering it up won't do you any good. I often tell the story of how when it happened to us, the first few employees that leave that you don't replace because you can't afford to, you can kind of get away with that, but your staff isn't dumb, and they see that you're not replacing someone, or you're replacing an expensive employee with a cheap one, and pretty soon it starts to sort of feed on itself. And the first thing you need to do is admit it, call it what it is, and honestly be willing to confront the situation. In that, part of that confrontation is watching for those internal discord, office politics, corporate immune system getting depressed so that the bacteria crops up. These are factors that are just, again, very acute. There's a real lack of alignment on strategy in the commoditization phase, largely because strategy is broken down. If you're a commodity, there tends to not be a lot of strategy. Employees are in sync with leadership here. They're not. Look at the difference between commoditization and acceleration. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. And so there can be infighting, there can be a lot of doubt, dubiousness. You tend to operate worse and worse every day. Part of that is because you're cutting budgets. Part of that is because it's a discouraging environment. It can be a discouraging environment to work in. Internal discord. Again, disagreements or differences of opinion that before might have been overlooked now become somewhat more material, especially if you're not making your mortgage payment. We were talking earlier that you might have a disagreement, but if you're making your bonus, you can overlook it. Well, if you have a disagreement and not only are you not making a bonus, you're not making your mortgage payment, now you're going to be much more interested in getting your opinion heard. A lot of gossip at work. Now, we talked about this at the beginning in the acceleration module, how there's a lot of gossip there, and that's something you want to watch out for, but it was probably more of the kind of good gossip, the fun gossip, whereas this tends to be the not so good gossip. Did you hear the latest rumor kind of a gossip, the backstabbing gossip and those sorts of things. And that's just really, really destructive. Office politics are really getting in the way. Big problem when it comes to commoditization mode. And so you can see, in my opinion, the most important thing, the most significant, the most destructive thing about being commoditization mode is not the marketplace dynamics that you're facing. Those are a big deal. It's the internal dynamics that decide whether you're going to live or die. So when you look at the chart here, in those first two phases, you're in the green. Saturation starts to pull you into the red. In commoditization mode, you're down here into the the stalled bucket, lack of consensus, loss of focus, loss of nerve, inconsistency. The lack of consensus is the biggest problem that we run into, because if it doesn't matter what your strategy is, if you don't have alignment around it, it's not going to get executed anyway. So even if you come up with the perfect plan, if you don't address the internal dynamics, it's not going to work. And I could give you story after story of companies that went chapter 13 because of this. They didn't appreciate the need for addressing the destructive internal dynamics. If you look at the 4 phases of the cycle and you look at the pattern across the 4 phases, internal dynamics tend to decline with each phase. And the trend, this is our national research here, the trend that we saw there has held true here. This is the overall results for the survey as a whole. And this is what it looks for those of you in commoditization mode. We're tipped into the red. We have a fever. We really don't feel well with respect to the internal dynamics. You got to get the fever down before you can go back to work. You've got to get the fever down. And so that's something that you really want to pay attention to at this phase. You all said your biggest business challenge had to relate with people, personnel, staffing, employees. Those are the issues, because people issues are what prevent companies from responding. It's the single biggest thing that we need to worry about at this phase. As a result, very often it's difficult to keep people on staff during this phase. It's hard to keep them because people don't just work for a paycheck. You know that. They work for a vision. They work for hope. They work for a future. And if they don't see it, they're probably going to look for it elsewhere. So the whole bottom half of this list is related to those sorts of dynamics: office politics, gossip, a lack of alignment, issues. We have a very short saying in our company, and that is the kind truth. Speak the kind truth, because truth without kindness is mean. You need to tell the truth, but truth without kindness is mean. But kindness without truth is actually cruel, because you're not doing anybody any good. So we have a cultural rule in our organization that we need to speak the kind truth in the right format, at the right time, in the right way, but don't whitewash it, don't compromise it. So honestly confront where you're at in your own mind. Watch for those dangerous internal dynamics corporately and draw them out, call them out, and deal with them. And then a corollary to that I thought was important enough to bring out is to pay attention to your flock, both at home and the office. 2 charts that are just really bring it home to me is this: I can't stop thinking about work when I go home now. It also pokes its head up during the acceleration mode, but that's because you're winning, you're having fun. It's fun to think about work when you go home. Could be a little unhealthy, but it's fun. In this case, it's more like you can't not. You lie awake in bed at night thinking about it. And this is probably the most troubling chart of the whole day. Work is harming my personal relationships. It's not, work is work. Business is business. Life is life. And if you're in commoditization mode and it's starting to compromise your personal and family and friendship relationships, you really need an intervention. And so I would just encourage you to, again, not unlike what we said in the last module, not my fault is my problem. Don't blame yourself if your company's in commoditization mode. Don't bear that burden on your shoulders. It's too big of a burden to bear. It's a natural function of the cycle. Not my fault, is my problem. Who better to fix it but me? So if you're dealing with these sorts of things, pay attention to your flock. Do whatever you need to do to make that right. Beware opportunism or knee-jerk reactions. This is often the case in commoditization. Is it's hard to make a decision because, well, when you don't have alignment around the conference room table, you tend to just keep bouncing around, right? And you can call it disagreement, or you can call it overthinking, or maybe it's even if in your own mind, I just don't know. I just don't know. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? I don't know. We tend to overthink things in this mode, and we can't seem to make a decision. So as a result, strategically, we start to kind of go nowhere. The ship is adrift. The rudder isn't turning. And so we become more opportunistic than strategic, which doesn't work. Our research, all of our research shows that when companies, there is something called strategic opportunism, which is within the context of your overarching strategy, stuff happens and you can take advantage of it. It's not the same thing as, well, why don't we try that? Why don't we try that? Or why don't we try that? That's shooting from the hip, and it just doesn't work in this phase. But it's a pretty tempting thing to do. As a result, you tend to get a lot of false starts. We tried that. We tried that. I'm laughing because I lived this. I mean, this study came as a result of 15 years of research, but all of these questions came about not just through academic study, but through living it and saying, wow, this is what happened. This is what our experience was. I wonder if other companies have had this experience. And sure enough, here it is, all over the place. So watch that. Watch this. We talked in acceleration about ready, fire, aim, and how it's always something to be careful of. But when you're aligned strategically and you're all on the same page, ready, fire, aim hurts a lot less if you miss the target than it does in this case, because you don't have many bullets left. And that's really one of the biggest challenges of commoditization. This is why you really need to start disruption if you haven't started in the saturation phase, because typically when you're in saturation, you still have some corporate resources that you can devote to stuff like this. Very often when you get to commoditization, you just don't. You don't have time, you don't have money, you don't have staff capability, man hours, and that's one of the big problems. So beware opportunism or knee-jerk reactions. Some of that is survival mode stuff you need to do, but it's not where you want to spend most of your time. And then finally, we also want to talk about, I say finally, not because it's the last thing, but it's taken 4 hours to get here. Let's talk about succession plans. And this is something that's close to my heart, especially in closely held small businesses. Look at this chart. We've recently gone through an acquisition, or we'll soon go through one. In maturation mode, that can be the case because, as you're growing, perhaps you're going to get acquired, or you're going to acquire a company. In commoditization mode, this is fire sale stuff and acquisition, or a merger, sort of the same story. Maturation mode, maybe we'll merge with these guys, and create something bigger than us. In this case, it's like, how do I get out of this? And then leadership succession. This is a big concern, leadership succession. Most succession plans fail. I'm sure you're aware of that, especially in closely held small businesses. And the thing that we're seeing, which is fascinating, is the baby boomers are now retiring and dying, and they were the biggest generation. Now, we got the millennials. The largest transfer of wealth in US history is happening over the next 20 years. We all know that. That's been sort of in the news for a long period of time. What a lot of us haven't realized is much of that wealth is in the form of closely held small businesses. And so whether you're transferring it from father or mother to son or daughter, which is one way of doing it, or just from founder or owner to a successor, it's not so much that you're transferring a lot of cash, you're transferring a closely held small business. And so that wealth transfer, in order for it to happen effectively, succession needs to happen effectively. As you can see, fewer than 1 in 3 baby boomer businesses has an exit strategy. Fewer than 1 in 3. That's incredible. 70% of family-owned or closely held businesses fail after the founder leaves. Wow. That's an opportunity for improvement. I think I know why. It's not the only reason, but it's a pretty significant reason. If you look at it through the lens of the disruption cycle, very often an industry or a corporate life cycle corresponds with a human life cycle. When it does, you got a problem. And the reason is the founder, the owner, the seller is basing their expectations and often their valuation on the upswing. I built this company. I've been running it for the past 40 years. We've been very successful over that period of time. I deserve to be paid. There's a psychological aspect to that. There's also a financial aspect to that. In comes the 32-year-old buyer, son, daughter, or just loyal, faithful employee, and they say, yes, that's all true, but I see clouds on the horizon. I see rough waves ahead. I'm seeing the price pressure that we're dealing with every day. I can't afford to pay you what you think you want, either literally or psychologically. I just can't. Sellers basing their expectations on past performance, buyer basing their expectations on future performance. Never the twain shall meet. I believe that this is a lot of reasons why closely held businesses succession plans fail, because just as the owner is getting tired, the business model is getting tired. The cycle is turning. What do you do? What do you do? You need disruption. Now, this is really close to my heart because not only have we consulted a fair number of companies right here on this issue, going through succession ourselves. As I'm the seller. I mentioned earlier, it's a 10-year process. It's been a very long time. We're doing it right. I was the victim of a failed buyout on the buyer side 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and I said I need to learn from that. Now I'm on the seller side. One of the lessons we learned is take it slow, take it easy, find the right people, take your time. But the other lesson we learned was this one. And so I've been working closely with the incoming generation. There are 2 of us in the outgoing. There are 3 in the incoming. Very slow transition. We've been working really closely to get our company to the acceleration mode again, to a new cycle of growth, which makes me as the outgoing generation feel a little bit jealous because I'm not going to get to participate and have fun with that, although I could stay if I wanted. But what it enables is it enables them to pay me, honestly, frankly, and it enables them to have the confidence to want to step into this thing. That's the key. Is if you're trying to transition anytime in saturation or commoditization mode, you're going to run into this issue. You're there. If you're there, you're there. The trick is to find a way to develop a new business plan or business model or business proposition that is going to unlock the key to growth for another entire generation. You might not be able to do that in 30 days, right? It might take 3 years. That's why this is so important at this period of time. So don't allow culture and irrelevance to derail your succession plans. Follow the wisdom of the disruption cycle. Help the incoming generation, if you're the outgoing, and vice versa, to develop a newly relevant proposition for the next generation. How do you do that? How do you do that? There's a really 30,000 foot level simple answer to that. Obviously it gets complicated, but at the 30,000 foot level, it's really simple. In this phase, customers don't know what we stand for anymore because we don't stand for anything. We stand for lowering our price every day. It's getting hard for them to tell us apart from other companies like us. You know, we're the ones with the red logo, not the blue one, whatever that means. It's a really difficult time. In commoditization mode, you got this great gray, if you're looking at the competitive marketplace, it's just a bunch of gray. Nothing really stands out. So you're trying to, you know, yell louder to get a prospect's attention or price lower to get the deal signed. How do you do this? You recognize, this is building on everything that we've talked about thus far, you recognize that the internal dynamics hold the key. So what are you looking at here? The top part you recognize, 4 phases of the cycle. You got your green to your red, your thermometer, you're sick, you got a fever. We talked about that. If you look at what companies say their biggest challenge is across the 4 phases, on the left side, the biggest challenge tend to be things external, like competition, maybe technology, innovation, change, even regulations is external. On the right side, it's internal, leadership, retention, pricing, nepotism, closely held businesses, miscommunication, teamwork, culture. Here it is. At the 30,000 foot level, this is the marketing worldview speaking to you. When you're most relevant to the marketplace, you're most focused on the marketplace. There's a reason for that. When you're least relevant to the marketplace, you're most focused on yourself. There's a reason for that. What do they tell you? What do psychologists tell you to do when you're depressed? Get out and serve somebody. Get out of your own skin, quit dwelling on your own problems, get out and serve somebody. It's the same exact principle. If you're in saturation or commoditization mode, get out and serve somebody. Turn your attention back to the marketplace. That's the key. That's the first key is you confront your situation, you recognize the problems, you deal with the kind truth internally, and then you say, we're going to get relevant again. And the way we're going to get relevant again is not by fighting with each other, but it's by leaving the building and understanding the marketplace and where its needs are and leaving behind all of our sacred cows. We're going to get relevant to the market again. And there's this new sense of energy that comes from that. And that gets us to the 7th point, which is to actively pursue a new or renewed business model. That's the key, is actively pursue it as a team. Grow your company up, find your new business model, right? That's what you say. You say, we need a new business model. Well, you're not going to sit back in your easy chair and have it come to you. You got to go get it. You got to go get it. And that's the wonderful thing about business. What do you fear most about the future of your company in commoditization mode? A lack of a plan. Things are slow, success, growth. There's just a lack. You're not a victim. Don't be a victim, be an agent, step into this. Yes, the marketplace has changed and you don't know your place in it. So what do? Figure out how it's changed and find a new place. That's what you do. It's really a fascinating proposition. It is uncharted territory. You're embarking on it. Again, in the maturation phase, you're embarking on it, but that's more like we're expanding into new markets. We're trying to learn them. This is, we got to create a new market. We got to find a new market. How do we do that? Embark on it. We need a new business model. Let's do it. So the key is to focus on the unmentioned piece of the circle here, which is disruption. That is a stage in the cycle. And in most of our research, maybe 1% of companies or 2% are actually in the disruption phase. We didn't have any in this case. And that's okay, because it's not abnormal. Because most of the time, when you're in the disruption phase, it's like, boom, you're disrupting and you get into acceleration. You either fail fast or you get into acceleration fast. But this is what you need to do. You need to disrupt yourself. Sometimes it's erasing the board and starting over. Most of the time it's not. You got everything from companies that erase the board and start over. We talked about Netflix earlier, how when they decided to go into the rental business, 3% of their business were rentals. 3%. So it's basically erasing the board and committing to that 3%. That's a way to do it. You got a company like Apple that says, we're not going to erase the board. We're going to milk our smartphones while we launch our watches. And we're going to milk our watches while we launch our services. And that's the way to do it. And then you have companies like Procter & Gamble and Frito-Lay and the big conglomerates. And the way they manage it is they aim to have products in every phase of the cycle at all times. So they're not destroying anything. They're just saying, we know Pepsi's commoditized, but we can milk Pepsi for a long period of time. So we're going to keep doing that. And in the meantime, we're going to launch kiwi vegetable kale juice, or buy that small company that sells that stuff. And that's what they do. So you can erase the board and start over, or you can launch a new product even while you're serving your existing clients. There's a whole variety of ways to do it. Don't think that you have to start over every time. The interesting thing, this is a great quote from David Baker. I cited him once before. He's a consultant to our industry, and this is a COVID moment. He talks about what a great opportunity this is. As he says, usually you kind of want to limit the disruption, but there are times when you just need to yank the Band-Aid off. If you've got some issues going on inside your company, if you've got some problems, now's the time to yank the Band-Aid off. As Baker says, there's already a lot of disruption going on, so people are kind of, the boat is rocking, and if it rocks one more time, they may not even notice it, and that gives you cover. So if you need to explain or justify significant shifts, it's more difficult to do when the rest of the economy is doing great. But right now, as he says here, these opportunities come along every 10 or 20 years or so, or in the case of a pandemic, hopefully every 100 years, and you don't want to waste it. So if you've made tough decisions already, what's a few more? If you see reality differently than you did a few months ago, if this crisis has caused you to really confront your situation or recognize that that person is not a key player or they're not part of the future of the company or what have you, now's the time to act, and your team might actually be not only less against it, but more open to it. We're doing something. We're trying, we might, the boat might sink, but at least we're trying something here. It's a good time to do it. And the way that I would consider you conceive of it, and hopefully, as you've seen over the course of these 4 sessions, it's really about thinking differently. All of it is about thinking differently. we talked in the maturation phase about codifying your brand, and we talked in the saturation phase about, you're going to burn some of that equity. Well, in the commoditization phase, the most important thing to understand is that your business does not have a brand. Your brand has a business. So if you remember in the maturation phase, I said, initially the business defines the value of the brand, but the brand can help define or drive the value of the business. So it's kind of like you got the business first, and then there's the brand, and the brand can help the business. Well, here's what I'm really saying. The brand is the business. Your business does not have a brand. Your brand has a business. What do I mean by that? A business is a material thing, and material things decay. A brand is an idea, and ideas are eternal. Hold tightly to your mission. That's your brand, your reputation, your mission, your vision, that thing that you do that you uniquely provide to the marketplace, whatever it is. Hold tightly to that, because that's eternal. It'll never go away. Hold loosely to your model. And we do just the opposite in business. We hold on to our model. We say, we have to have that meeting in person because that's just how you do it. Or there's no way we could do that online. You can't buy shoes online. Are you crazy? We're all buying shoes online. You can buy a car online without test driving it. And Carvana, by the way, just passed CarMax in terms of market capitalization. A truck pulls up to your house and drops off your car. You can't do that online, except that you can. So hold tightly to your mission, hold loosely to your model. Everything is on the table, in other words. And if you think that way, it's pretty cool. Again, these are 4-hour-long sessions. We don't have time to get, this is what I do for a living, right? We have detailed consulting engagements to solve these issues for our clients. Let me give you the thought process to approach with it, because I want to give you something to chew on and to noodle on. The way to do this is through two simple things: expertise and empathy. You have expertise, more expertise than you probably realize, and expertise can be bought. You have empathy, but probably not as much as you think. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that. Why expertise and empathy? Very simply, nobody ever asked for a microwave oven. Think about that. Nobody ever did, because nobody ever knew it existed. What happened with the microwave oven was a bunch of engineers at Raytheon figured out that you could heat food with magnetrons, however a microwave works. So what? It was almost an accident. It actually was an accident in the lab. I think they were doing some experiments and he had a piece of pie or something there and it got warm. It's like, oh, you can do that. At the same time, market research was showing that this is the 60s, right? The 50s and the 60s. And so our lives are speeding up. There's less leisure time. More women are going to work. Mom doesn't have time to cook as much anymore and those sorts of things. And so you've got this empathy, meaning understanding and relating to consumer lifestyles and how they're changing, and expertise of these weird little microwaves can cook food. And all it took was somebody to go, hey, if we put this with this, boom, we just invented an entire new category of appliance. Expertise plus empathy. I found it fascinating. I don't know if any of you saw this, but a recent issue of Wired magazine talked about this guy, Nathan Wolfe. The subhead here says, the virologist helped crack an impossible problem: how to insure against the economic fallout from rare but devastating pandemics. Now, the story goes on to say how nobody bought the policy, which is kind of interesting. It's a fascinating read. I'd encourage you to read it. But one of the things that, one of the quotes here, this is at the beginning of the article, the author says, insurance, not interested. A lot of non-professionals would say. But look at the last paragraph. A global pandemic and the steps we would take to stop it would mean business closings, layoffs, and mass unemployment. This is before COVID. Preparing to face an outbreak, he'd come to believe, required anticipating those impacts. So here's a person who had the expertise, who understood insurance. It was actually, it wasn't Swiss Re, I think it was the other one, reinsurance. That really hardcore sort of understanding of how your business works, and said, I can bring this expertise to help address the issues that are going to arise via a global pandemic. And all it taught was really, or all it required really thinking differently about the effects of a pandemic. So back to Boston Consulting Group, which we quoted last time, talking about transitory and transformational response, how transitory response is kind of how you're dealing with the short term, and transformational moves are smarter. They're smarter because they require expertise. I might have a good idea for what I need as a consumer as it relates to insurance and protection and security and those sorts of things, but I don't have the expertise that you do in your business, so it never really even formulates in my brain. You have that expertise. You know about underwriting and risk and all those sorts of things. You have the expertise. You just need to find a way to apply it to the marketplace. So I'm going to give you two extremes for how to cultivate empathy. The one costs you nothing, and the other costs you a lot, but it's something that you could consider doing as an industry. The one that costs you nothing is the what doesn't work wall. Put up a wall at your company or a whiteboard. Have a retreat. Spend a few hours together and just talk about what doesn't work. You know what doesn't work? Airplane trips, they don't work. I'm talking generally now, right? No-show socks, they don't work because they roll off your feet. Cocktail tables don't work, right? Because they're always tipping. We actually have a what doesn't work well at our company, and it's a general thing. It's really fun for people. And we just say, whenever you come across something in the world that doesn't work, write it up here. Not that we're going to solve it, but you never know. And those are just some of the entries from online dating services. Some of the entries from things that don't work. But think about it as it relates to your business. What doesn't work? You can think about it in the realm of the 4 Ps or the 5 Ps. What doesn't work from a pricing perspective? Not only us pricing, but how people pay for what they get and the satisfactions that they receive. What doesn't work for people? When do people start complaining about their premiums? When do companies cancel their policies as it relates to pricing? What about the products? What's good about them? What's bad about them? What's missing in the marketplace? What if we could insure against global pandemics? No one ever thought of that until the last guy did. How products are distributed. We talked a little bit last time about online, activating that whole channel and so forth. How things are promoted. It's not just radio commercials, TV commercials, or magazine ads. The whole world is marketing these days. You can't distinguish marketing from journalism, from advertising, from entertainment anymore. There's a whole host of options. And then with respect to your people and how you use your people, what their titles are and so forth. What isn't working? What doesn't work in your business? And then you can even expand it to what's not working in our culture. No shortage there, right? We can't even communicate. We can't even agree on a common set of facts in our culture and society. What's not working in my city? Is there something about my city that's not working? Because that could be a new business or a new product opportunity. Is there a neighborhood that's not working? Is there an industry that's not working? The restaurant industry right now is not working. What does that mean for you? Your client base. Which clients are happy? Which clients are sad? What's not working? Even your own lifestyle. If you get to this point, if you're the proprietor or the owner, this isn't working. I hate coming to work every day. Articulate that. And this is a way of generating empathy, because as soon as you identify something that's not working, almost by definition, you've identified an opportunity for a new product or service. And if you combine that with your expertise, you might just stumble across something. So that's the cheap and easy way to do it. And it's also a lot of fun. There's also another way to do it, which we have institutionalized at our company. We call it ideals research. It's basically an advanced form of market segmentation, where in a typical poll, you'll ask 30 questions of 300 people, right? Because you're trying to get a sense of whatever you're trying to get a sense of. In an ideal study, you actually ask hundreds of questions of thousands of people. So just ponder that for a minute. Hundreds of questions of thousands of people. It's like a giant personality test. And if you've ever taken a personality test, you answer all these questions, and some of them seem kind of unusual and odd, but you get through it, and then it tells you your personality, and you're like, dang, that's pretty good. How do they do that? It's the same sort of a thing, where with tens of thousands of question answer combinations, people tend to naturally fall into categories. The way certain groups of people answer certain kinds of questions in clusters. And we call those natural market segments. And it's like a empathy generator on steroids, because you're not building in any assumptions. You're letting the statistics do the talking. And I'll just give you a handful of examples. One of the first times we did this was in the skiing industry, and identified 5 natural market segments. Now with skiing, if I said, how would you segment skiers? You'd probably say like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Right, that's true. But that's not entirely the story. Hardcore, socials, cruisers, drivers, and greenies. So if you're a ski sock manufacturer, you got to make some choices. Let's say you're selling ski socks, and the ski socks market is commoditized, right? You're just selling them cheaper and cheaper, and REI is just grinding you on the price. What if you came out with a special ski sock targeted to hardcores that was guaranteed to protect in sub-zero temperatures and couldn't be ripped with a knife or something like that? Now you charge them triple the price and you're the only one on the market. Or let's say you're targeting socials and their concern, of course, is, après ski and how well they're dressed and all that. And so you come out with a ski sock line, a fashion ski sock line that are signed by celebrities or something. You get where I'm going. It's silly, but it's true. Or let's say you're targeting greenies, beginners, and you come up with a ski sock that's specially reinforced to keep you in your boot. I don't know if that's even possible technologically wise. That probably is. You put some copper wires in there. You get my point? When you understand the natural market segments, it's like empathy on steroids, because you're like, wow, we could do some serious product development here. We did this study for leading real estate companies of the world. They're based in Chicago. There are 550 of them around the country. Typically, the leading real estate broker in every city is a leading real estate companies of the world member. 7 natural market segments in the residential real estate industry. Who knew? You can sort of infer who they are from their titles, not entirely, but I'll just tell you, I'm a contented. You don't want to see my kitchen because it's 30 years old. It's dated. My wife wants to move. I don't. Blow me out of my house with dynamite. I'm a contented. That's what we are. Contenteds tend to be old, but I was a contented when I was 21 because this is your personality. It's not your age. So it correlates with age some, but not entirely. If you were to meet a young, well-dressed lady at Starbucks, she might be a striver or a new nester. And if you're a real estate agent, you want to know the difference, because new nesters grew up in a 2-parent household, went to prep school, a good college, and are now working in an accounting firm, making a nice salary. Strivers grew up in a single-parent household, went to a poor high school, put themselves through community college, and are now night nurses at the hospital. I'm generalizing, of course. They make the same amount of money. They're the same age to look at them. But do you think a striver and a new nester has a different view of mortgages and risk and hearth and home and family and all those sorts of things? And if you're a real estate broker, do you think you could create products and services and language and approaches for each of these segments? Absolutely, you could. Self-sufficients are the kind of people that tend to put out the for sale by owner side. Realtors are afraid to go after them because there's the mean people. Their bark is worse than their bite. 50% of them are ready to be signed up, but you got to develop a different kind of approach to them. That's what this research is for. And the last example I'll give you, because it's just the most fun, is from the funeral industry, where there are 6 natural market segments. And this might be really relevant because talk about a commoditized industry. What we discovered was segment 2 and segment 3 were the 2 segments that were basically content with how things are done today. And segment 1, 6, 5, and 4 are all looking for ways to avoid going to a traditional funeral home. For segment 1, it's largely based on price, largely. For segment 4, it's largely based on process. They want to do everything online. For segment 6, it's largely based on religion, which is an entirely different vector, but they don't like the sort of religious aspect of most funeral homes. We launched a Silicon Valley-based .com startup to target segment 4 that is changing the funeral industry. We launched, which you haven't seen yet, but you will, a retail value menu strip center concept targeting the Pine Boxer segment 1, where you go in there and there's 5 options on the wall, just like the drive-through board at McDonald's, to make it easy and cheap for them. And there's more stuff like that in development. This is empathy on steroids. When you understand the national market segments, you see the need, and then you bring your expertise to it, and now you have something. You can create something. So as McKinsey and Company said in their recent report, it's critical that we over-invest in rediscovering what matters to customers now and understanding the impact of them. It's critical that we pursue empathy and expertise. And I cited this in an earlier, this is just another easy, cheap way to move down this road if you're in commoditization mode, by having a corporate retreat and working through some of these session exercises. It kind of goes with the what doesn't work wall or board. The key is you have the expertise, surface it. If you have some expertise that's missing, like if you want to do an online offering and you don't have that capability, go on LinkedIn and search for somebody, because they're out there and they'll come consult with you. Bring them in for a day. You have the expertise. Find a way to develop the empathy, either within yourself or through a market research study of some kind, and then find a way to pursue that new business model, even as you're milking your old. Whew, I'm excited. I'm tired, but I'm excited. So I wrapped up every other session with a single word It was enjoy for acceleration because we really want you to enjoy that phase. It was equity for maturation because we want you to take advantage of the equity and build it. It was engage in saturation. It's time for change. And in this one, I would say the word is agency. You are an agent. Creative destruction is a fact of life. Creative disruption is something that you can seize, and your choice is either to be a victim, leading to destruction, or be an agent of change, which will lead to new creation, new life, and an entirely new cycle for your company. I'm out of breath. Marit?
Can you hear me okay, Steve? Great. Well, I'm actually impressed with the energy you had for that. That was actually a really excellent presentation, and I wasn't able today to hear all of your presentations, but we've recorded them for everybody, and we'll have them online later. So if you liked this one and you missed an earlier one and want to get some more information, or I hope you'll actually think, well, this is something my team needs to hear or my leadership needs to hear. And by next week, you should be able to go back on our website at iit.org and download it and play it and use it as a tool. So great ideas. Actually, one of the interesting things, Steve, for our association, we've tended to look at our membership from a size standpoint, but clearly there's some other market segmentation as far as where they are, frankly, in this cycle, and how do you support them in the variety of ways as well. So I know we can take something from our association and learn from it and bring it back to our board as well. So I want to thank you, Steve, for being with us once again. It was a great day, and we appreciate all the work that you've done with us, and we look forward to continuing to learn from you. We will also be sending out evaluations to everyone, so we hope you'll provide your feedback to us. And from IT and all of our family here, we do miss everybody. We can't wait to see you again. There is certainly something to be said to be able to see each other in person and collaborate. I think one of the things we talk about a lot is, we can be productive, we can get so much work done at home, but we are missing out on some of the innovation and the creativity. And certainly you can see in the commoditization mode, that synergy and that team being together, if for any other cycle, I would guess this is a really key one, that you're together, you're facing each other, you're talking about your issues, and you're holding on with, compassion for your high performers so that you're there in the long run. I think there's a lot of things you brought up today, Steve, that are so true for so many people, whether it's, how do you deal with succession planning before it's too late? And then it's an expensive thing to handle, and there isn't the energy and the enthusiasm that's required for disruption. So Steve, thank you for your time. It was great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Have a great afternoon, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.